Marina Ormes from Astrology Heals, and I invited my good friend Jenni Webb, another astrologer, to come and chat with me about Uranus going into Gemini. Jenni, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jenni Webb. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, and my business is Jenni Webb Astrology. So I'm pretty easy to find. It's Jenni Webb Astrology on Patreon or YouTube. But I met Marina through OPA, and so I'm excited about our chat today about Uranus and Gemini.
Yeah. Yeah, so I know that I talk to folks on my channel a lot of times about self-care and how to work with these energies, but I know that you and I have both looked at kind of the history of what Uranus and Gemini, what kind of things were going on. I'm not a historian, disclaimer, but but kind of interesting just to think about it because Uranus is that energy of disruption, and Gemini brings in themes of communications and technology and how we communicate with one another. So yeah, yeah, tell me like your thoughts on how you approach Uranus in Gemini.
Yeah, like you said, Uranus is uh, it's a very fast-moving planet. Just meaning not it actually moves fast, but the effects of it. Because when I think of Uranus, I go more toward the transit first before I think of Uranus in the natal chart. And transit Uranus tends to act very quickly. And Noel Till always said it's like a lightning bolt. It's there and it's gone. That's the effect of it.
Mm.
You don't normally see it. You have a lasting effect over months or years. It comes and it's gone. And so, um, and then I think of, Uranus has been in Taurus for like
Mhm.
7 years, and Taurus is probably the most. I'm reluctant to use the word stubborn, but it's the most like kind of stuck sign, right? It's fixed and it's Earth.
Yeah.
And Uranus energy coming through that has been tough, I think, really breaking up old stagnant stuff that tends to get stuck. And so now it's going into Gemini, I think fast moving and and things and change coming in. Uranus has changed. So I think of change coming in very quickly and maybe
Mhm.
even repeatedly in different areas. So yeah, you and I looked back at Uranus and Gemini in history. I look back at the 1940s, and I think you went back to the 1800s.
Yeah.
And in the 1940s, we had World War II. And there were so many inventions and developments during that time in the early 1940s. Uranus went to Gemini in 1941, around August that year, I think. And after that, there were so many inventions that came in so fast. And so that's what I'm wondering if we're going to see is this things moving quickly, and can we keep up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And there's such a shift, like you said, from Uranus and Taurus, which, yeah, and I love what you said about the lightning bolt experience too, like disruption and things happening suddenly. But with Taurus, it's that fixed sign, that slow moving energy, that groundedness. And so we have had that experience of disruption to sort of the status quo and what we experience as normal and routine. And that's going to shift now with Uranus going into Gemini to the realm of things that move much faster, with the Gemini air, and yeah, and developments in technology, and yeah. So tell me a little bit more about what you found in the 1940s. So Uranus has an 84-year cycle, so it spends 7 years in a sign, but it's been 84 years since it's been in this sign. So for people in their 80s get to have that repeat
Mhm.
experience. But yeah, but going back, so what did you notice from that time around World War II and technology?
Yeah. I think World War II began in 1939, but the United States did not get involved until a few months after Uranus went into Gemini. And so what stood out to me was uh, Pearl Harbor happened in December 1941. Now, Uranus had already retrograded back into Taurus, but when Pearl Harbor happened, it had been a plan in motion, right? When did they plan? Did those plans really ramp up when Uranus went into Gemini in August earlier that year? So
Yeah.
it happened very quickly. You know, Pearl Harbor happened. We declared war on Japan. 3 days later, we declared war on Germany and Italy. So, I think of plans and talking and information coming in very quickly and surprises. Uranus is surprises, and Pearl Harbor was a surprise attack. The other something else, I mean, and then because of the war, we had developments in jet engines, radar, computers, the atomic bomb, the microwave, but I think mostly of travel and communication because those are Gemini. And the one thing that really stood out, Alan Turing. Now I forget do you remember what the movie was called that he was in?
No, I can't remember.
Okay. So, Benedict Cumberbatch played Alan.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, someone can mention it in the comments, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But he was a code breaker back in World War II, and in the late 1930s, he invented things. He invented uh, uh, something called the Turing machine. So he was like a mathematician, very brilliant, but he was a code breaker, and they were having a really hard time in breaking these codes from Germany, and it
Yeah.
but anyway, we see that, information, taking lots and lots of information and trying to make sense of it, which I think is Gemini energy. But also, right, Uranus left Gemini and went into Cancer 1949, I think. And right after that, when that whole transit was over, Alan Turing published a paper, Can Machines Think? And
Yeah.
I think, oh, that's the beginning of AI.
Yeah.
Maybe that was one of the first ideas, or someone, I'm not sure who was first to come out, but that was a big deal, that paper. And so now Uranus is getting ready to go back into Gemini, and AI, I think, it's just now taking off, and we've only seen the tip of the iceberg. I wonder what will develop there over the next, 7 or 8 years.
Yeah. An interesting piece is that disruptive energy of Uranus. And so, like you said, the surprise attack, which interesting that it happened with Uranus in Taurus because it was such a shakeup to people's sense of normalcy.
Mhm.
And but if you think about like that's what we've been going through, if nothing else, we've had disruptions to what's normal, and this time Uranus will retrograde back into Taurus in between November and April of 2026. So we've got some time with it going into Gemini, then kind of repeating that pattern, which hopefully we don't have to experience that again. But again, yeah, it is. It's that sense of things, surprises, shock, things happening from out of the blue. And when I think, when you're talking about something that happens really fast, the processing of it afterward does take time.
Mhm.
And so whether it's a happy surprise or a hard surprise, either way, it's like it takes time to kind of digest what happened and take it in and understand and adjust to it. And so I think, our nervous systems, we need to kind of attend to our nervous systems and our mental health and just taking care of ourselves so that we can stay grounded and, surprising things happen. We're able to absorb that and process it and take care of ourselves through that. So,
Yeah, I like how you worded that, the disruption of normalcy. the
Mhm.
disruption of the status quo and anything that's on autopilot. I
Yeah.
liked how you worded and that's what it feels like, and that causes stress in our
Mhm.
lives when we have that kind of disruption because we can't rely on our moon sign to be on autopilot so much. We have to go to our sun sign and process a new experience. And I know that's uh, your area of focus is
Mm.
healing. And so what kind of recommendations do you have for, people who are maybe like the fixed signs, which are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius? I have a fixed sign T square, or
Mm.
people who have earth signs in their chart who really do rely on, my moon's in Taurus. I really rely on those habits. So what, for someone like me who's really feels those shakeups and really feels, disrupted or feels the stress of this fast moving energy. What kind of recommendations do you have for people?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think in general, we the more we can support our foundations, and that's what resilience is, right? It's the ability to know who we are, to remember where we belong, like what's important to us, and I talk about that a lot on my YouTube channel. But yeah, so that we can come back to that place of center when things get shaken up, because you may not, like, your house burns down, you can't go to your house, right? So what do you do? Where do you go for comfort? And knock on wood, I don't wish that for anybody, but it's that idea of, like, you don't have your normal place of retreat, of recouping, of, so what does that look like, and how do you do that? You have to cultivate that inside of yourself, and we can do that with our breath, and I don't know about fixed versus mutable, but definitely people with air signs, especially, like, working with your breath, um, and then earth signs, it's going to be taking care of your body, and how are you going to get your body's needs met when even if you don't have your normal things that are comforting to you. So it's like building practices for yourself that you can go to feel safe, to feel okay when you don't have something that's part of your routine. So it could be, and for water signs, it could be your emotional self-care. Maybe I just need to recognize that when I feel upset, I need that moment to go express my anger or cry or something that I need to do that helps me come back to center. And so knowing what that is for yourself is where to start, right? And we're also, I and this isn't specific to Uranus in Gemini, but Uranus in general, when it transits your chart or brings its energies forward, that it can be shocking and disruptive. So how do we cultivate our sense of self, our sense of center, and how we're going to restore feeling okay when things are disrupted?
Yeah. I like how you broke that up by the different elements, the
Yeah.
zodiac signs, like air signs and breath work, or maybe earth signs and doing yoga, work
Mhm.
with connecting mind body. And it sounds like having different kinds of safe places for us.
Yeah.
Safe, that could be, I like going to the park. I like being in nature. For me,
Yeah.
that's kind of a safe place where I can recharge my batteries, or having sense of community feels so important these days. Having people that are like you, or people that can understand, that you can reach out to, that you feel safe talking to. I think community is so important. And I think that's one of the reasons why we connected. I think you and I were, it's the community is of astrologers. I
Right.
think it's important as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's a good segue into talking about um, the community aspect of Gemini. And one of the things Gemini is about is networking.
Mhm.
And it kind of, I remember traditionally being told it's, the sign of the gossip. And so, like, the way that information gets shared in a community. And so thinking about that too, and that's like how that sense of how we connect, having disruptions to that. So if we've had disruptions with Uranus in Taurus, we've had disruptions to what we see as normal. How can we, now that Uranus is going into Gemini, recognize that disruptions to our communication, our ways of networking, our ways of connecting with others, sharing information, getting our news, the way that we learn things, those are the kinds of things that will be disrupted, like our sense of how our sense of normal was disrupted. So, uh, and that is um, something that when we are again anticipating it, we can kind of go, okay, I can flex, I can adapt, and bring in that Gemini adaptability to shift gears, to try something different, to do it in different ways. And yeah, so, and you asked about moon signs, and I think when I was talking about air and earth, and that could be your moon, if that's what, because your moon is where you feel comfortable.
Mhm.
So yeah, so is that how you think about it, or do you, what would you add to?
About the
Yeah.
moon.
Yeah, the moon, or just the communication
Oh,
aspect of it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, the moon is comfort, and the moon is how we uh process, or the moon is how we handle experiences we've already had before. So
Mm.
the moon is our habits, the things we do without thinking. And so when we have a new experience, we use our sun sign to
Mm.
process those new experiences. But you brought up, I mean, that's pretty interesting. You brought up, disruptions to those Gemini things and how
Mm.
we communicate, and you were talking about community, and I do think Gemini is connected to community, and it rules over those people we talk to on a regular basis. It rules over neighbors. I think of it connected to the third house. But I also think, now that you've brought it up, I also think Uranus can rule over community and friendships. Its connection to the 11th house. So they both do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah.
So,
Right.
so maybe, we'll see how communities are more and more important. I was thinking back to some discussions that were going on at the Jupiter Saturn conjunction in December of 2020. They were conjunct at 0 degrees of Aquarius.
Yeah.
And there were some conversations about how we were going to move from being global back to, the focus coming back to community, as we were, expanding and connecting and expanding and connecting. And now that we have the Jupiter Saturn, which rules over society,
Hmm.
it's now conjunct in air signs for 200 years, moving from Earth to air. So that's something else, moving from Earth to air. We're moving from global down back to our little communities and communal living, and so I
Yeah.
think we've already, been in that process. But now that you brought it up, now that I'm thinking about it, both those signs I feel like are uh, connected to connection,
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
connection
Right.
to
Right.
other people,
Mm.
and uh, I think of air signs not really as being that emotional, but caring about human rights.
Mm.
Uranus has a connection there to human rights, and caring about other people, and other people being okay and having the right to exist. And so, um, lots to think about there with Gemini. There's, probably going to be lots of ideas, and lots of different things. And maybe, you mentioned before trial and error. I think of that as Gemini. a lot of trial and error. What
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to try some things.
Yeah, that so when I looked back, so you went back 84 years to World War II, and I went back 84 years before that and looked at the 1860s. And just as Uranus went into Gemini in the mid 1860s, I believe it was 65, um, the they were in the process of laying the transatlantic telegraph cable, which is, I mean, seems like, who cares these days, but it was, think about what a change in communication that was for that time, and that what kind of technology that brought. And one of the, like, I think the slogan was from 2 weeks to, what was it? Oh, I see if I can find it here. Yeah, 2 weeks to 2 minutes. So that was their communication time, um, increasing by that order of magnitude, which is like, huge,
What kind of messages could they send across? What were the first messages they sent?
oh, I don't know what the
Like,
actual, like,
was it
the,
just like little
the
strips of
it
like
was
if my
tapping. Yeah,
thinking?
tapping. So like Morse code.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was so they could send that through a cable,
Okay.
and send a message, which, was a big deal because, yeah, otherwise you had to wait for the letter to go on the ship, right, to get across the ocean.
Weeks and
So,
weeks.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right. So, but what was interesting was that through that time when Uranus was in Gemini, not only were they laid the first cable, but that one, was, I'm not sure if it was destroyed, but it broke immediately because they put too much voltage through it, trying to speed things up. And so that one failed. And then they laid another one that snapped as they were laying it. And then it wasn't really until, Uranus finally went into Cancer that they actually were successful in laying the third cable, and they repaired the second one. So then they had two. So I thought that was interesting. It was like the time frame of Uranus in Gemini was when they were trying to, like, they had the vision, they were working on it, they were trying to make it happen, but that Uranus energy was also like, it was like seeing the possibility that we couldn't see before, but also like that disruption of things not working and having to, innovate and be creative and figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
I
I mean,
think
what
it's
a great
interesting.
metaphor for kind of the times that we're in. It's like, yeah, we see all these possibilities, especially like you were saying for AI and computers thinking, but maybe we have a lot of trial and error to go through before we that really takes off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point too, is, sometimes we're looking back to like the events and what happened, but sometimes a planet and sign will have its effect behind the scenes too,
Yeah.
having an effect on our minds and in working on something, and that we might not see the final result until later. So, I mean, I think you're making a really good point of, all the work that was done there, just like, Alan Turing, writing that paper in 1950, he wrote it right after, Uranus went out of Gemini, but he was processing that for years before he actually wrote that paper, right? I'm sure he was thinking
Yeah,
about it. So,
totally. Yeah.
right. Did
Right.
When did we discover Neptune? Was it when Uranus was in Taurus? I thought it was 1860s, but I can't remember off the
Yeah.
top.
Yeah. That's a good question. I don't have the date in front of me, but yeah, it was around 1860, I believe. Yeah.
Oh,
So that would have been when Uranus was in Taurus, if
oh.
I'm correct. But yeah, we'll be tentative on that. Yeah.
And
Interesting.
we discovered Uranus in 17, it was around 1776, wasn't it?
1780, I believe, French Revolution. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's that. I mean, that's a whole nother thing, right? With the discovery of planets and bringing their energies in. Yeah. We had in traditional astrology the seven the seven visible planets with the naked eye, and then in modern times, discovering these outer planets. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
fascinating.
You know, Stephen Forrest says with Uranus that back in the day, way before pollution, when they had clear skies, that it was possible for them to see Uranus with the naked eye. You know, back
Yeah,
then, but they didn't see it because they weren't ready. That's what he
yeah,
said.
yeah,
That we saw it when we were ready for those energies. So, you know, no matter what Uranus brings to us, you know, we're at a point where, you know, we can handle it.
yeah,
You know, we
right.
can handle those surprises.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because I think that is so true. And I think that is a message here too, is that we can handle what is coming. It might feel different. We might not have our old habits and patterns working for us anymore, or our what we consider normal may not work anymore, but we can do this.
Yeah.
And those revolutionary energies can awaken something in us.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And you know, I've been thinking a lot about the outer planets lining up in the
Yeah,
early degrees of those signs, and we have Pluto already went into the air sign of Aquarius and is hanging out around 1, 2, 3 degrees of Aquarius right now. And Uranus will be going the air sign of Gemini, so they'll be making that 120-degree trine for the next for the rest of the 2020s. They'll be making that trine there. So exciting time for air sign people, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. But then we've already been dealing with the Saturn Neptune conjunction and the early degrees of Aries, fire signs. So we have these, you know, this 60-degree sextile that Neptune Saturn's at the halfway point between those planets.
yeah, that alignment is fascinating. And yeah, I have a blog post about the planetary alignments that goes in depth on that. It's yeah, that yeah. So tell me a little more. What do you make of that? Because I know I've shared on here about it, but I'm curious
Yeah,
your thoughts.
I'm waiting for Uranus to get into Gemini so I can see a little more how this is going to play out because I feel like it's a couple different, you know, there's the air sign dynamic of Pluto and Uranus, but then there's the Saturn and Neptune, which will both be direct through July 14th-ish, I think.
Yeah,
And, you know, that's a lot of, you know, they both changed sign. I think March, April, May, they were moving into Aries. And, you know, Neptune is that melting down of the old structure, you know, the old structure going away and the confusion. And that's what I felt coming in on a societal level, you know, and on a personal level. You know, there was some confusion and there were things in my personal life I didn't even know I was confused about until Saturn went into Aries and I could see because Saturn is seeing truth. Saturn is reality. Saturn is seeing what needs to be fixed. And I didn't know what was going, the issues I was having until Saturn came in. But I think it'll take a while to have that clarity because Neptune is that spiritual experience. We're confused because we're supposed to be. You get answers when it's time. But Saturn's coming in. Saturn tends to bring answers. So for me, I feel like it's taking the spiritual Neptune and making it real, Saturn, or forming an ideal Neptune and trying to figure out how to make it real. Or you can have, you know, Saturn fears and taking that fear and imagining the worst Neptune so our fears can get blown out of proportion. So there's, you know, lots of different things I think that can go on but you know, those two planets combine they merge and their energies fuse. But it's, you know, Aries is very dynamic. Pisces is just watery and you almost don't even know anything's there. And but Aries is so dynamic that I've noticed it pretty quickly. But my hope is that with you know, sextiles are more easy flowing energy that's like an immature trine,
Hmm.
is how I've heard it been described. I like to look at it that way, that it's kind of like an exciting energy, but it's still easy flowing. We have the easy flowing trine and it's kind of funneling through the Neptune Saturn. So hopefully whatever's not working, um, Pluto and Uranus can help. That revolutionary energy for change and transformation can help us clear things up,
Mm,
help us
yeah.
see. Uranus is so shocking because all of a sudden we don't see and then we do. That's why it feels like shock, because you wake up one day and you're like, oh, this is who I am. I get it now. Right? So
Yeah.
hopefully we can, we can see, but we can also put it to form. I like to see them line up this way versus, 2014, 10, 11 years ago, they, were all in a square, like a T
Yeah.
square. We had Pluto, Uranus, and um,
Right.
I forget, Jupiter hopped in there for a little bit. And so
Yeah.
that was tough to deal with. So I mean, I like to I like to think of it this way right now, that whatever the difficulties are, I feel like there's help.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. There is help.
Mhm.
And I have, I guess, another view or perspective on that, which is that everything that has been being shaken up or disrupted up till now, like, what if we assumed that that is so that we can change in the ways that we need to change? Because when you're too comfortable and things are working out, you don't you don't learn, you don't grow, you don't adapt, change, innovate. So maybe we needed to go through some of those harder parts with the square. And I mean, the Pluto Uranus square was really intense and active throughout the 2010s, and especially in the early years. And then, like you said, Jupiter jumping in there as well. So, yeah, that that breakdown, that pressure that said, no, things you cannot keep doing things the way you have been. But what if we saw that as opening to what it is we're becoming? And that we recognize that just because we don't know how to do this based on what we've done already doesn't mean we can't learn and figure it out and innovate and adapt, which is what these energies are about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like
yeah,
that.
yeah. So
Love
that
that.
the Uranus energy is about shakeup and change. It's also about new ideas and new possibilities, things we couldn't see before. So, for instance, somebody had the idea, like you were saying, to can machines think? Like some that was percolating in somebody's mind, and somebody had the idea to lay a transatlantic telegraph cable. Like, you could just imagine somebody or groups of people getting excited about, hey, we could do this and then we could communicate in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Just like if we think about where we're at now and what is possible if we're stepping into something that we can't see yet.
Yeah.
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 I loved what you said about well, you go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, every time I think of like the future and like technology, I always pictured, and this is might make me sound really old, but I always picture like holograms. I'm like, when are we gonna see like holograms where you can talk to someone as if they're like right there? I saw them like in movies like back in the 80s and 90s. And
Yeah,
so that's one thing that's kind of silly, but like, I mean, we
right.
talk through Zoom and we can, discuss and look at someone when they're talking. And that, I mean, that's fairly new within the past 10 years that we would do this on like a regular basis. But I'm looking forward to all those really cool inventions to come that maybe we won't see them over the next 7 or 8 years, but like we talked about earlier, that they may be developing very
Mhm.
quickly. And maybe
Hmm.
we will have those holograms where we can talk to someone and it looks like they're sitting there with you in the meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know. So crazy. So crazy. That and that Aries energy too is there. Like you were saying, the Neptune and Saturn and Aries. I loved what you said. I couldn't see what I was confused about until Neptune went into or Saturn went into Aries.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, right. We can't make and we don't know yet what it is we are creating. And that Aries energy says be active, like
Mhm.
step into, put yourself into it, put your truth into it, put your authenticity, your caring into it, and move forward. And you don't know who or what is going to be that little baby action step that you know makes a big difference. So
Right.
not every not every little action step we do is going to make a big difference, but someone somewhere will. And so that's why they're worth doing.
Yeah, yeah. I like that you've said that, about Aries and it's about taking action, but not necessarily planning. It's about trying stuff, getting back to that trial and error because Aries and Gemini are both early signs, right? Like Aries is the
Yeah.
beginning, it's spring. These aren't signs where we, make elaborate plans and we have elaborate organization or dig deep into the unconscious. Like these are very early, like try this. Does it work? Nope, try something else. What do you feel like trying? What impulse is coming up within you?
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about that much
Mm,
until this point, and we were chatting about it.
mm, yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. And also just I think one other piece about Uranus in Gemini and disruptions to society and that networking piece and how we communicate with one another. So we might experience communication disruptions, but we also can adapt and we can shift to new ways of doing things. And you can have that moment of the where you're processing the surprise or the shock and you feel overwhelmed by it. But then if you can do those practices we were talking about, coming back to center, taking care of yourself so that you can remember who you are and what you need and how, and then we can figure out, oh, okay, here's what I'm going to do instead. Here's
Yeah.
how I'm going to adapt. Here's what I can do.
Mhm.
So those
And
options. Yeah.
looking at it as an opportunity as well, those communication disruptions in whatever form it comes in. But I live in Ohio, and recently a major health network in the area was hacked,
Mm,
and it was ransomware. And so we couldn't access our health records for weeks, and the doctors couldn't. The doctors had no idea who had an appointment, who didn't. Their phones were out. It
yeah.
was a mess, and now it's going to be a mess because they had to do everything on paper that whole time, and now they've got to reschedule appointments and um, we could see things like that. We could see
Yeah.
cell phones get knocked out for a while. I mean, any number of things could happen, but that, could be an opportunity if you don't have your phone for a while or can't access YouTube for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Take an opportunity to have stillness and quiet. It's so even when I had turn off notifications, I find myself still getting notified for things.
Yeah.
I have to go back in and try to find which notifications are not silenced. But
Mm,
yeah, I've been thinking about that recently. How often do I want to be interrupted? Because with Uranus and Gemini, we may find ourselves getting interrupted more often.
mm,
Communication moving faster, or even people having the impulse to communicate more, which can be a good thing, but we could also feel overwhelmed,
yeah.
especially, certain signs or certain types of people. If someone's an introvert, uh, uh, some people don't like to be interrupted a whole lot.
Right.
Having
Right.
your phone silenced certain times of the day or having uh, a minimum amount of time of stillness.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so so important. I love that you said that. Yeah, that's the stillness is because how many new ideas are in that stillness or new
Huh.
perspectives or right, like and having the quiet allows you to create space to get to those different possibilities.
Right. I've heard several people say they get great ideas when they're in the shower.
Uh-huh, exactly.
Because
Yeah.
everything's turned off and then
Right.
you're by yourself. There's not another human being's energy interacting with you. You're not on your phone.
Yep.
Most people aren't when they're in the bath, but
Yeah,
right,
right.
but space has been created. That's probably why those ideas are coming in.
Yes. Yeah. Love that. Yeah. So right. So we can have new ideas. And the Gemini is very distractible, right? But it's also very good at noticing. So noticing things that you couldn't necessarily see. So we just have to channel that in a positive direction, right? Instead of noticing everything that's irrelevant, noticing the thing that is going to be supportive or helpful. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, knowing how to notice something and say, okay, that's not it, and moving, letting
Mhm.
go of what you don't need, right?
Yeah.
That way
Yes.
you can
Yeah.
focus on what you do need. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. I love it. What a great conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you have
I was
any
just
other thoughts? Anything else you want to?
No, I was just
Yeah.
thinking this has been really cool because
Yeah.
there's, through our conversation, which is
Mm,
what Gemini wants us all to do, through our and Uranus is, to me about networking and finding your, people. Um, I feel like we've had ideas and discussed things I never thought of,
yeah.
up to this
Yeah.
point, about, and I've had lots of ideas about Uranus and Gemini, and
Yeah.
I feel like I've, learned something here too. So this is really cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
enjoyed this
I
a lot.
love I love the perspective and the back and forth and the way that it sparks ideas. Yes. So wonderful. Well, so I'm Marina Ormes, and I have a YouTube channel. It's Astrology Heals, and I have my website, astrologyheals.com. I also have a member site where people can go and connect with me even more deeply. So check that out, and thanks for being here. And I'll let Jenni share as well.
Yeah, my website's jenniwebbastrology.com, and I do a little bit of teaching on Patreon. You can also find daily astrology updates for all the zodiac signs on Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, Jenni, and thanks for joining us,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Yeah. Bye.